Hey folks, and welcome back to another Hytale plugin development video. In this one, guys, we're going to be going over command arguments. In the last one, we showed you how to register a basic command as well as use it. In this one, we're more or less going to be talking about arguments. Arguments are data that actually comes after the command. So like this 100 would be an argument. And the command that we're specifically making today is called oxygen command. And we'll be making 4 different variants of it just to show you guys how to use each type of argument. Now, Hytale introduces a really cool answer to doing arguments, which are required arguments, which I'm sure you could guess, it requires you provide that data. Optional arguments, where you could just do simply /oxygen, or you could also specify the amount. So whether you specify it or not, it will run. Then DefaultArgs, which if you do not provide it and just do /oxygen, it will come up with an amount. It will have a default value that it falls back on. And then a FlagArg is a different type of argument, but it's like a Boolean off and on switch. And that is simply just by doing -- and then whatever the flag is called. But we'll be going over all of these different types. Another important note to note about these arguments is that in a required argument, they are positionally required, which means that whenever I would do /oxygen, say that the format would be player and then 100. I couldn't go out of my way and do oxygen 100 and then player. However, whenever you are using OptionalArgs, DefaultArgs, and FlagArgs, because of how they have these dashes in front of where you specify the amount and then the actual integer value, you can position that whichever way. So say that I also had a argument where I could do -- player. So then I would be able to do oxygen -- amount 100 -- player and then a username. Or I could do it the vice versa, where I could do oxygen -- player username and then -- amount 100. But I would have to follow no specific pattern because these are not positionally required. So just whenever you guys are making these commands where, for example, they would have to do /oxygen and then put a player name and then put the amount, then you would use RequiredArgs. In any other case, use the other ones because they are not positionally required. So let's start out with our RequiredArgs here. So in order to get started, make sure you get your command class ready with abstracting player command and your basic constructor and your execute method. And then you will go ahead and inside of the class, but outside of your constructors and methods, you will declare it. So we're going to do private because this field will not be used outside of here. And we're going to go required arg. And then we need to put diamond operators. And then we need to specify the type. So as you can see, our argument here is actually a number. So we're going to be using the integer data type. And then we're just going to call this oxygen amount. And then go inside of your constructor and we have to initialize this and give Hytale a little bit of more information about it. So let's do oxygen amount equals with required arg. And then the required arg requires a name. So we will call this oxygen. A description, amount of oxygen to give. And then we need to give it an arg type. So let's do arg types dot integer. This type right here should match roughly what you're putting in these diamond operators up here. And now with that out of the way, we can more or less make the command. So making this command, it is not as simple as if you've done the plugin development for Minecraft. We cannot just access the player reference and set the oxygen level or the air bubbles or whatever. You have to do it a different way. So we have to do something called entity stat map. So we'll call this variable stat map, and we will equal it to store dot get component, and then we're going to use ref and then entity stat map dot get component type. All right, after this, then we need to do int oxygen index, and then we're going to set this equal to default entity stat types dot get oxygen. All right, after stat map, we could just do stat map dot add stat value. So then you can use oxygen index and then type in the amount that you're going to add. This is where the required arg comes into play here. Oxygen amount. And make sure after you type in oxygen amount that you press get and then pass in command context to that field. If this is a little bit confusing for this to be inside of here, you can always extract it out doing int value equals, and then take this out of here. And then you could add this inside of here. Now, as you can see, it is warning me quite clearly that add stat value may produce a null pointer exception because stat map may be null. In order to fix this warning and to kind of safeguard this in the future, we can always do if stat map is equal to null, then we're going to return out of this method. A general good idea as well would be to take command context here and send a message out to whoever the person who ran this command is and say there is no stat map or whatever dedicated error you want to give at that point. Because, for example, if the entity stat map was on another player, you could say, well, that player probably is not online. And then it would return into here. So now let's go ahead and register this command. So get command registry.register command, new oxygen command. Oxygen gives players oxygen. And now that we have this fully set up here, I'm going to run and build a jar of this, put it into the Hytale server, and we'll see how that works. Okay, we are now in Hytale, and we will see right now if we type in /oxygen that it tells us that we actually need to provide an amount in there. Now you see how this says oxygen right here? The code that is directly linked with that is here in name. So I would actually in the future change this to amount so that it has in those diamond braces amount. But anyways, let's go ahead and get underwater here and see the command work in its glory. So let's do /oxygen and I'll give myself 50. This will pretty much fill me up. And there we go. Something to note about Hytale here is that you cannot overheal yourself or, you know, give you a crazy amount of oxygen. The second that you go over the 100 cap, it'll just cap it back down to 100. So even if I would do 300, it caps it as 100, and then the bar depletes again. All right, with that out of the way now you have a basic understanding of required args. Now let's go ahead and do optional args. So we're just going to go ahead and change this to optional arg. Change this to with optional arg. And we're going to give it a name. So this time let's use amount. And then a description, amount of oxygen to give. And then the arg type. So arg types dot integer. Now something to note about this is that this variable may or may not be here. So if I were to keep my code as is right now, this would be a really bad idea. And the reason is because oxygen amount would not have a variable. So if this code would run, it would most likely throw an error. So something that Hytale has provided inside of optional args here is we can actually check to see if it has a value. So if oxygen amount dot provided, and then we pass it in command context. Now this block would run if it was provided, but I want this block to run if it has not been provided. So what I'll do that is I'll get the negate operator, the exclamation mark, to reverse this Boolean. And I'm going to say, if that is the case here, we're going to return out of here. And we're going to give the thing a little error here that says command context dot send message dot raw. I need a oxygen amount. And if we go ahead and build this up and put it back into the server once again, I will show you guys the results of that. All right, now folks, we are back in here once again. And if we just give /oxygen a try, the plugin has replied, I need an oxygen amount. So if we do oxygen 50, of course, you can't really see anything happening since we're out of the water here. That's not how I need to specify it. Just like we talked about earlier, you have to use those double dashes. So we have to do oxygen -- amount 5. Or you can also do oxygen -- amount equals 5. Both of those essentially work in the same way. So /oxygen -- amount. Let's do 20. And let's do it again with the other way. Amount equals 40. And both of those ways work. Just keep in mind, these arguments have to be specified with the double dashes. All right. So the next one up on our list here is something called DefaultArgs. So let's go ahead and redo these definitions again. DefaultArg. And then we're going to write with a DefaultArg. And then we have to add a few things to this method here to make this valid. We need a default value. So we'll make our default value 100. And then we're going to make our default value a description. Fills up oxygen completely. And then down here, we're going to get rid of this code that we added here because pretty much as long as it goes on here, this will never be not provided. And then we can just build this plugin once again and try it out inside of the server. All right, we are now back in here, and with default arguments, we'll show you what happens. So I can type in /oxygen and it will heal me to full. Or I can just type in oxygen -- amount 50. And the same thing for optional applies here. You cannot just do oxygen 50. It will tell you the proper way to do it. Again, we do not have to provide a value, or we can provide a value. It is up to the command operator. Okay, so the last one we are rolling into here is called FlagArg. And FlagArg is pretty simple. Actually, you have to get rid of these diamond operators here. And we will rewrite this with FlagArg. And all this requires is a name and a description. So let's do max and then gives max oxygen. So flags are like Boolean switches. They're either going to be true or false. True if it's in the command and it's present, or false where it is not. So this is how you simply would write this inside the code here. We will go into value, and we're actually going to take this one out since we are maxing out this value regardless. And we're going to do if oxygen amount, which is the flag here, provided command context. And then inside the if, we're going to add the stat map call here. And the value is going to be 100 because that is the max. And now we will go ahead and run a build for this and show you guys how it works out inside of the server. All right, now we are back here once again. And if we do the oxygen command, as you can see here, it does nothing now. But if we do oxygen -- max with that flag argument in there, it will actually go ahead and activate. And again, it has to have that flag to it. If you ever wonder about how that command is set up, you can always do oxygen -- help. And it will tell you in the flag arguments -- max gives max oxygen. Well, folks, that is all I have for you guys in this video. If you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Anyways, I will see you guys in the next video.